What if I told you that the most important thing that is happening in Ferrari is not seen on the track? What nobody is telling you is how Lewis Hamilton, in his first year dressed in red, is dismantling and reconstructing the SF-25 from within. Are you prepared to discover the most silent and powerful transformation of this season? While most of the paddock and fans focus their attention on the podiums, abandons or strategic errors of Ferrari, there is a completely ignored narrative. Lewis Hamilton's meticulous work to understand and improve a deeply problematic car. Since his arrival in Maranello, Hamilton has assumed a responsibility that exceeds that of a conventional pilot. He has not limited himself to piloting the SF-25. He has dissected it. On his arrival, Ferrari was at a technical crossroads. They came from a 2024 season in which, despite being seconds in the construction championship, they evidenced limitations in the career rhythm and in the adaptation of their car to different types of circuits. With the SF-25, the promise was a radical change in design philosophy. A more rigid chassis, a front suspension with traction system instead of the traditional pushrod, and an aerodynamic reconfiguration inspired by concepts of McLaren and Red Bull. However, this technical ambition resulted in a series of collateral effects that no one in Maranello had attempted at all. But what few understand is that Hamilton did not only drive, he came to intervene. Aware that the car was not what had been promised, he decided to get involved from the first moment in the internal dynamics of the team. He analyzed each data sheet, discussed directly with the designers of the aerodynamic area and requested total access to the technical documentation of the SF-25. It was he who identified, for example, that the rear suspension was generating more negative load than expected, affecting the stability of the car when it passed on curbs. These details are not usually available to veteran pilots, but Hamilton approached them with the mentality of an experienced engineer, convinced that the problem was not only piloting but of conceptual architecture. His arrival also unleashed silent reconfiguration in Ferrari's internal communication. Carrera engineers, responsible for the simulation area, and even members of the design department began to have more frequent and multidisciplinary meetings. Hamilton imposed a work style based on cross-learning and empirical validation, moving away from the traditional Ferrari hierarchical approach where decisions were made without a direct correlation with the pilot's input. That structural transformation, although still in process, is already beginning to change the way Ferrari develops his car. Thus, the invisible context of the SF-25 is not only that of a problematic car, but that of a culture in metamorphosis. And at the center of that process, there is Hamilton, operating in silence but with an influence that could redefine Ferrari's technical destiny. What is not seen is how Hamilton has taken the reins of development. Their working days do not end when the engine turns off. The British has spent endless hours in the Maranello simulator, interpreting telemetrias that many gave normal and discovering hidden patterns that compromised the dynamics of the car. Hamilton identified how the new rear suspension caused a sinking that altered aerodynamic efficiency, especially in slow curves and intense braking areas. This undercover engineer is not new to Hamilton, but in Ferrari he has reached a level that even in Mercedes had been allowed to exercise. In Mercedes, their experience and feedback were highly valued, but there was an established infrastructure and a dominant car that allowed to operate within foreseeable margins. In Maranello, on the other hand, the technical chaos left by the 2024 season forced a reconstruction from scratch. Given that lack of direction, Hamilton became a compass. The most revealing of his technical work is the way in which he has reinterpreted telemetry data not from a passive point of view as most pilots usually do, but in a comparative and projective way. When analyzing braking data in critical sectors of the Chinese circuit, for example, Hamilton noticed a gap in the compression of the front axis in relation to the point of maximum aerodynamic load, something that was generating nonlinear rebounds and loss of progressive adhesion. In private sessions, he replied these scenarios in the simulator and proposed adjustments in the rigidity of the third element of the suspension, a key piece in control of the vertical movements of the car. In addition, he began to suggest changes in the ERS energy management logic. He identified that in circuits with short curves, the recovery mapping was not fully taking advantage of the deceleration moments, which compromised power delivery in critical output areas. This feedback was so specific that it led software engineers to partially redesign the recovery algorithm for certain career configurations. Internally, engineers began to refer to Hamilton as an helmet analyst. Not because he simply pilot, but because each practice session was treated as a technical audit. Every return he gave was broken down in daily technical meetings, where his voice went from being an opinion to being a decisive argument in the design of solutions. This type of involvement also modified the dynamics with his teammate. Charles Leclerc, traditionally Ferrari's most technical pilot, was found for the first time in years with a partner who understood the guts of the car with the same depth and, in some cases, with more historical perspective. Hamilton not only brought experience, but a work methodology that demanded specific results and data. This silent pressure caused Leclerc to also begin to get more deeply involved in areas that he delegated before, generating an internal technical competence that Ferrari had not experienced in years. The modifications in the rear suspension, the adjustment of the rake of the car, and the redefinition of the wear limits in the skate under the chassis, a critical piece for the legality of the car according to the FIA, did not arise from an isolated laboratory, but of conversations initiated by Hamilton himself after comparing telemetry data between simulator and track. The internal comparison with Charles Leclerc also began to lean at key moments. Although Leclerc remains fast in ideal conditions, Hamilton's consistency in adverse situations such as changing rain or last-minute setups is making a tangible difference. Under these conditions, the British has found an operation range in the SF-25 that allows him to extract 95% of his performance without the car betraying it. This evolution is not measured only in positions won or added points, but in the progressive elimination of design errors that Ferrari dragged for years without a real solution. This process is precisely what within the team have begun to call the silent evolution. A transformation without rambombant statements or visible structural changes, but that is happening through small details. A new design in the flow channels under the flat bottom, a readjustment in the angle of attack of the front flaps, or even a re-education in the way in which engineers interpret the pilot's sensations. Hamilton has made technical feedback no longer a footnote in post-career meetings, but the center of conversation. Change has also impacted the development pace. Ferrari, historically slow to implement solutions, has begun to introduce adjustments between large awards, something that did not do consistency since the Schumacher era. Hamilton's thrust to validate each modification with data before installing new parts on the track has raised the technical execution standard. For the first time in years, Maranello operates with a continuous improvement cycle that does not depend exclusively on the wind tunnel or CFD computers, but on the practical criteria of a pilot who understands each component as part of a dynamic ecosystem. This evolution, although discreet, is deep. It is no longer about running behind Red Bull or McLaren waiting for the improvements to work in inertia. Ferrari now has a clear direction, an active correction methodology, and a pilot who acts as a bridge between the theory and the reality of the asphalt. The results can be gradual, but the trend is unequivocal. SF-25 is ceasing to be a dangerous unknown to become, little by little, a project with a defined technical identity. And that transformation, without fuss or headlines, bears the name of Lewis Hamilton recorded in each modified carbon fiber. The most fascinating thing is that all this could only be the beginning. Hamilton is not only helping the SF-25 survive to the 2025 season, it is sowing the basis for a long-term structural transformation within Ferrari. Its impact goes beyond immediate performance. It is influencing the technical culture of the team, in development procedures and, above all, in the way in which the role of the pilot within the organization is conceived. Ferrari had been without a pilot who dared to question engineering decisions from a place of practical authority. Hamilton has broken with that passive tradition. It has introduced a new form of collaboration between the pilot and the technical departments. Instead of waiting for the car to work and then adapt, Hamilton proposes, designs, tests, and valid. It is establishing a system where the pilot feedback becomes the core of the evolutionary design of the car. And it does not from emotion but from the method. Crossing data, comparing historical benchmarks, and generating hypotheses that are then checked on the track. This new approach is already modifying the future plans of the team. Ferrari's internal structure is beginning to integrate Hamilton into the early phases of car development 2026. His experience is being used not only to correct SF-25 errors, but to anticipate strategic decisions in the design of the following car. Elements such as the geometry of the front suspension, the mass distribution, and the logic of the cooling system are being renowned from now on with their direct participation. Even areas such as cockpit ergonomics and DRS calibration are being designed based on the specific sensitivity of the British pilot. Hamilton's influence has also generated a domino effect within Maranello's own human structure. Young engineers are being relocated in positions closer to the track development area, a decision motivated by the need to shorten the time between observation, analysis, and execution. This agile work model, inspired by the dynamics that Hamilton knew about Mercedes, radically contrasts with the traditional Ferrari rhythm, characterized by slow decisions and rigid hierarchies. In parallel, Charles Leclerc has begun to absorb this new dynamic. Inspired by the technical approach of his partner, Monegasco has intensified his participation in simulations, technical meetings and feedback sessions. This has caused the level of internal demand to increase, generating positive competition that enriches the team. For the first time in a long time, Ferrari has two pilots who not only compete on the track, but also push the development of the car from within, each with their style, but with a common goal: to rebuild the greatness of the Scuderia from the base. In a sport where success is often measured by tenths and where the pressure destroys races, Hamilton has brought Ferrari somewhat more valuable than speed: direction. A technical and human compass that can redefine the future of the most emblematic team in the category. It is sowing what could be the new golden cycle of Maranello. This is the time you should ask yourself a question. Do you think Hamilton is building from the shadows the 2026 champion car? Or are we overestimating its influence and underestimating Ferrari's limits? Let it know in the comments.